Hello and welcome to 41 Files, the latest podcast from 41 Action News. We're glad you're with us today, joined by Sam Hartle, as always, digital producer. Hi, Sam.
I don't have any candy for the neighborhood yet.
Boy, you got to get on that, man.
Yeah.
Get on it.
I'm the candy.
Stephen Dial, 41 Action News reporter. Hi, Steve.
I have all the candy in the building.
That's why I can't find any.
He does. I ate a lot of candy last night.
Those are the dulcet tones of 41 Action News reporter Kat Reed. Hi, Kat.
Hi, sorry, I did have a really weird inhale there.
It's okay. Your inhale always, everyone's inhale always sounds weird because you don't ever hear yourself take a breath. And
Bill Clinton's inhale was really weird.
Whoa.
You hear President Trump's?
You do that because he kind of pulls on it. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm wearing, if you're watching on camera, I'm wearing a Halloween jacket. This is a David S. Pumpkins memorabilia kind of coat. And yeah, it's exactly right. I will have questions today. Today is Halloween as we record this podcast. What's your favorite costume you've ever worn?
I had a really good costume in November of October.
I was going to
like
November. You're doing it wrong.
November. I was thinking of the election. I went as the balloons from the DNC, and my boyfriend at the time went as Bill Clinton.
So, like, amazed by your presence kind of thing?
Yes.
That's phenomenal.
I had a bunch of balloons all over my body.
And he's just, like, looking at you in awe and wonderment?
Exactly.
That's great. Steven, do you have one that comes to mind that you love?
I grew up kind of lame when it came to the Halloween category.
Daniel?
I was a mad scientist one year, and then I think we've somehow covered this on the pod before, but my favorite costume was dressing up as Data from Star Trek.
Aww.
Did you do, like, pale makeup and everything, too?
Yeah, I had the phaser and the tricorder and everything.
Of course you did.
Phaser and the tricorder. I went as Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde one year. Senior year of high school, I did the Two-Face thing, cut my, down the middle, and I wore torn up clothes on one side and a lab coat on one side, and put a lot of hair gel on the Hyde side, and I mean, a lot for me. Anyway, so it's Halloween as we record this podcast, and Kat is back from working on a story that we've been working on for now a long time, and that's the latest with KCI and the hopefully new airport that Kansas City will have in the next few years. But there's been a bump in the road now as we continue to move along with this. We talked about this a little bit on 41 Action News at 10 last night, and a little bit this morning on 41 Action News today. The big question now is, maybe this is a little bit more expensive than what we originally thought. Or is it? Kat, bring us up to date on financing for the airport.
Yes, so I have a spooky update
Good.
for everyone.
Good.
Right.
Okay, so initially, the latest figure that we were quoted for the cost of the new terminal, the project cost, was $1.4 million. That was in June. Then we heard from some council members that they were learning the total cost of the project was going up to $1.9 billion. Sorry, did I say million again? I would say billion.
Billion.
It's not $1.4 million. If only we could build an airport.
Absolutely, that'd be great.
We could.
Small airport. So from 1.4 billion to 1.9 billion. So this morning we sat down, had an exclusive TV interview with Edgemore. And one of the things that we talked about is where the costs are coming from and what the numbers really represent. So one thing that was explained is that the project cost is different from the total cost of the terminal. And that's kind of like when you buy a house. You actually brought up this example, Taylor. You buy a house and then you have the mortgage. So the project cost is a figure different than the total cost. It's currently sitting at 1.6 now. So there has been an increase on project costs from 1.4 to 1.6, whereas when you add in the financing, it's going from 1.6 to 1.9.
So what you're going to pay for your house is more than what the sale price of the house is.
Exactly.
If we have listeners who have never paid a mortgage, that kind of thing. But if you've ever had any kind of, loan or anything like that, what you're going to end up paying is not what you originally signed up for necessarily because of the length of the loan and that kind of thing is what we're talking about here.
Exactly.
Edgemore being the developer of the airport is who we're talking about. If you're not familiar, that's who the developer is that you spoke to today exclusively.
Yes. And so one thing that we are kind of trying to delve into a little bit more is the aviation department, according to Edgemore, is very much aware of these financing costs, but I'm hoping to reach out to council members and find out, were they aware? Did you know that this was going to be a different number? And I think that's the big question to have answered, because a lot of people had some sticker shock hearing 1.9 billion. Yeah. But also Edgemore today is saying that the airlines are 100% behind it. Edgemore says that they could have done it at a lower cost, but that the airline said, no, we want the more gates, we want more room, so go ahead, go for it.
Because the airlines are footing the bill at this point.
Right.
That's the big thing, because that was something else that was we didn't address as strongly, and maybe didn't know full in fact, because that was something that is big about this airport and getting it passed. Is it's not going to cost you and me as taxpayers anything. The airport is, or the airlines are footing the bill, but when the price goes up, what we hear, we're like, okay, how does this affect the average taxpayer? Stephen, you had something?
So my question for Kat, and then we'll put it out to the room. If anyone knows me, I'm a very big supporter of the airport back home, Hartsville Jackson International. I've worked for Delta there. Just a little
Stephen's
plug.
supporter of everything back home.
It's
Anything
the
Atlanta.
world's busiest airport. So I have some contact with the airports. That's all I'm trying to say. My question to you, Kat, and just everyone else is, so you were mentioning the sticker shock price. The price is what the price is going to be. I'm wondering why the reaction was so, I mean, this is very popular on our website and on our Facebook. Like, one, do you think it's a matter of people not being educated of where the funds are coming from? And a project as massive as rebuilding an airport, like, wouldn't you expect that the prices are going to change? Like, do you think it's just a matter of people like, oh, more of our money going to, like, where do you think all the reaction from normal people is coming from?
I think it's coming from this innate sense that the project has been messed up from the beginning, if I'm being completely honest. If you think of how it all started, the fact that there wasn't even, a bid process in the beginning, and then actually the Star kind of called that out and said, no, like, we need to follow the law and have a competitive bidding process. So I think regular people sitting at home see this and they're like, it seems like it's one blunder after another. There was the disagreement over getting the MOU ironed out. There was the back and forth between the various companies, and I think that they just see it as mistakes.
I think they're not wrong. I mean, that's a fair way to look at it from someone sitting at home thinking whether they use the airport a lot, whether they, in this case, would not be paying for it, or whether it is affecting their tax dollars. When it's something this large, you hope to see something a little bit more smoothly done. To use the airport pun we've been using a lot, less turbulence is what you're hoping for with this, and we've seen quite a bit of turbulence along this process. So that's
I think you're put a shovel in the ground.
I think you're right about it. I think that is what's making people a little bit uneasy and ask lots of questions, and it's because before the vote even happened, I got here right before the vote happened. And before the vote even happened, there was lots of house divided aspect of this. And some people absolutely want it. We have to have this to move the city forward. Some people are like, no, we don't need all that. We like the airport the way it is. So having that, and then on top of it having kind of a bumpy ride, it just continues that fight of, see, I told you it was going to be this, and no, it's going to be fine. There's a lot of that kind of twined together, I think, a little bit.
And, the other thing is, especially from looking through the comments on the story, there's so much residual resentment that Burns and McDonnell wasn't chosen. Like, people are still
talking
on
about
that. And even council members, Councilman Scott Taylor still brings that up. Even in the mayoral debate, he brought up, the airport. I still think Burns and McDonnell should have done it. So you still hear that a lot.
I have several points. One, I think, to your point about that one, Kat, I question people's genuineness if they, for one hand, talk about how there wasn't the bid process initially because that initial bid was Burns and Mac. Yeah. So you can't have it both ways there. Two, the one argument that quieted the naysayers of the airport for a long time was the fact that this vote to approve the new KCI passed with a margin that no one ever thought was possible on this project. In the mid-'70s, including constituencies in the Northland, which people thought might have some hesitation to it, they turned out, in droves for a special election. But to have that margin of success, I think, convinced some of the naysayers, it's like, okay, all right, I'm going to back off. They're back now, and I think I almost wonder if this is part of the expectation of government. Mm-hmm. We're building a new airport here. If this was a project in Dallas or Seattle or L.A. or New York or Chicago,
people would question it.
The so-called turbulence that we're experiencing with this, that'd be like that'd be child's play. This would that would be page 6 of the newspaper. Mm-hmm. And so the people in the Midwest have a different expectation of government. I think that. I don't know if that really matches when you're talking about this level of a project.
Yeah. I do want to add another update that I got today that I just was reminded of as Sam was sharing his very insightful points. So there is a timeline change as well that I learned of today.
Okay.
So now they are tentatively saying January 2023. instead of November 2022, which was already pushed back.
So a couple of
about
months
here.
difference is what they're
A
talking
couple
about.
of months, and here's the reason why, and I apologize, this is going to get a little inside baseball.
No, go for it.
So you have to do an environmental assessment on the property before you can build
Sure.
a new terminal. And I guess they were working with the State Historic Preservation Office on this because it is a historic building and it was pretty cutting edge at the time when it was built. And so they had an agreement with SHPO, as it's called, and
SHPO.
SHPO,
What is
and
SHPO?
the State Historic Preservation Office.
Oh.
SHPO.
SHPO.
And they had an agreement, and apparently, like, SHPO wanted to change the nature of the agreement, so that's what's pushing them back. The FAA still has to approve the environmental assessment before you can break ground. And
Wow.
so that's the delay. They're hoping they can make up some of the time during the construction process, but you never know. And they also said technically the SHPO delay would put them opening in December of 2022, but no one wants to open an airport in between Thanksgiving and Christmas.
Right.
So that's
And-
why the January 2023.
And with Kat saying that, let's think about all of the great stories and possible things that we've talked about Kansas City trying to get. And think about, FIFA
Timeline.
being, you know what I'm saying, oh, this keeps changing. And like different groups that are thinking about investing money and bringing things here.
Right.
That when they hear those dates moving, they might just say, how about we just go somewhere that we already know
It's
can
done.
do this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's a good
When
point.
is FIFA happening while we're still alive?
FIFA.
How far out is that?
2026, right?
I hope so.
Yeah.
Like they'll choose
26.
before then. The match will be in
Right.
2026, but they'll choose
And
before then.
they're going to come visit the city in a few months. And so, like, if you say, well, we're going to build it, it's coming.
Right.
Like,
Are you?
Are you?
Right, because do we even have
And FIFA's just one of the.
a final design that we've seen yet? We haven't even seen that, have we?
No, because technically, and this is something I went up to the project office for the new terminal a couple months, I guess about a month ago, and they were kind of explaining some of the process to me. Which, by the way, it's crazy. Their project office is this like abandoned warehouse up there by the airport, and it was just. It was like this empty warehouse that they've transformed, and there are Post-it notes all over walls, and it's very like beautiful mind, like in there.
Very beautiful mind.
So I was up there, and they explained apparently their hands are a little bit tied because you have to have the environmental assessment approved by the FAA before you can have a complete design.
Okay.
So that's part of the process.
Because what if your design
Yeah.
negatively intersects with whatever they say you can't do, that kind of thing? You can't do it.
Yeah, and you have to
Until it's
prove that you got like the public feedback
Right.
on the environmental assessment, and that you weren't
Right.
like designing ahead of getting that
Right.
approval from the FAA. And basically, the thing I've learned is you don't want to upset the FAA.
Right.
I almost used that word, but I said upset instead.
That's
I
right.
said, I'm sorry.
Yeah, you don't want to upset them.
Absolutely. Well, that's a lot, but what we've learned is that, so there's still more to come. Your story will air tonight, so watch for that on 41 Action News, and we'll figure out exactly what price tag means whenever we talk about price tag, but maybe there's not quite the sticker shock that we originally thought when we heard this yesterday. Something to keep in mind as we move forward. Kat, thank you for that. I appreciate that.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Kat.
41 Files continues in a moment. We'll have some interviews coming up with Sarah Blake and Ariel Rothfield and stories they're working on as well. And we continue with our 41 Files podcast today, talking politics now because we are less than a week out from the election. And finally, we're recording this podcast on the morning of Halloween, October 31st. Last night, finally, we had our one and only debate between Sharice Davids and Congressman Kevin Yoder in the 3rd District of Kansas. They are running pretty close in that race, neck and neck, coming up for Election Day next Tuesday. And we're going to talk with Stephen Dial and Sarah Blake because they've been following these campaigns along the way. Sarah, I'll start with you. What are your thoughts on how the debate went last night? What did you think?
Well, personally, I'm glad that we finally got to see them sit down next to each other.
Yeah.
I think that this needed to happen. I think that if they hadn't have sat down and met, people would have been really angry about it. I know people were upset that we haven't seen Yoder do any sort of town hall in a very long time, and people were upset that we haven't seen Sharice actually sit down and talk to her opponent. So I thought that it was an interesting debate, to say the least, and but we needed to see it, and we needed to see how Sharice kind of conducts herself, because people have seen Yoder so many times.
Yeah,
I mean,
multi-term
he's
congressman.
4-term,
Yeah.
gonna hopefully, in his mind, win the 5th. So
Right.
he already knows what to say. But Charisse, I think we got to see that she is not used to being in
Yeah.
this sort of a political arena. But I think this needed to happen.
Right. Kind of a different debate format if you weren't able to watch it last night. The two of them sitting at kind of the same table, which is not what a lot of debates look like. Stephen, what did you think of Yoder's performance in the debate overall?
I mean, Yoder needed this debate more than Charisse Davis.
You think so?
Yes. And it's because of, and I don't believe in polls anymore. I'll just say that. I've said it multiple times on multiple platforms. But she's leading in the polling. She has less to prove. We're talking about a seat where Yoder may say that there's not a blue wave, but there is a blue wave, especially in his seat, because his seat in the last general election and the general election before, nationally for president, voted for a Democrat, but yet they voted for Yoder. And Yoder understands that. He says that the voters in the 3rd Congressional District are independent thinkers. It's Miami, Wyandotte, and Johnson counties. And while they did vote for Hillary Clinton in 2016, they also voted for him. So they think a little differently than just your typical, I'm only going to vote blue or I'm only going to vote red. He had the most to gain from this, but honestly, everyone, including myself, I didn't think it was going to happen, them debating. He told me multiple times that, why should I debate 7 days before an election when I had all these forums set up that she could have debated in as well.
Right. It was kind of an ongoing conversation all campaign long is, are these two ever going to be in the same room with one another?
Right. And the thing that hurts him is no matter how his performance was, thousands of people in that district have already made up their mind and voted or already knows who they're going to vote for.
Mm-hmm.
So it hurts him in that way. And it could hurt her in a way of people seeing he's polished in political realm of knowing what to say, how to say it. She's a newcomer.
Now, you could tell the difference between the debate styles last night.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And so, I mean, maybe, someone who hasn't made up their mind who is voting on election day, the debate may have swayed their decision. But, I mean, people's minds are pretty much made up, and so I think Yoder's nervous.
And it's a different time than, because you can kind of put the Nixon-Kennedy effect on those debates, where in their debates it was because Nixon had a serious flu virus, was pretty sick, looked awful on camera, but sounded good. And that's what people always compare those two. Is if you listen to that debate, people said Nixon won. If you watched it, people said Kennedy won going away. The presentation is obviously a big part of debates, but maybe less so now, I guess, people are just saying, I picked my person, I'm going to stick with my person no matter what they sound like, no matter, the debate isn't going to affect me very much. I know you said polls are not necessarily what you put a lot of faith in anymore, but there will be polls done after this election as well.
Right.
I'm curious what both of you think. Once this election is done and we have a winner, and if we're able to ask multiple people after for post-election polling, what was the number one issue for you that did it? What do you think most people in this race will say? This is why I voted for this person, or this was the most important issue to me. What do you think?
Well, I think that a lot of people are going to say, we're tired of the same old, we're tired of this. I think Kevin Yoder, time and time again, he said in his debate that he's more of the mainstream. She's a liberal, fanatic or just out there. She's not mainstream. But I think that
He said last night she sounded like a candidate from California, is how he described her last night.
Right, and constantly tying her to other, Nancy Pelosi, Warren. He probably said Pelosi as many times as he said Charisse's name.
Yeah.
But I think that he'll find that a lot of people in his own area will not agree that he has been representing them, and that's what a lot of people were saying in the comments too. Because if you were watching the debate, you could see how many people were commenting that they did not agree with him, and I was surprised to see that.
Okay.
I think it's kind of really, really easy. If we talk to someone after Election Day who is voting for Charisse Davis, they're voting for Charisse Davis for 2 or 3 things: healthcare, talking about pre-existing conditions, also talking about, like what Sarah said, getting tired of just the same old, and and the Trump effect. Yoder has had to distance himself at times from the president, but he also wants to be by the president. And so I think healthcare, just being energized, and Trump will be the reasons why people vote for Charisse. And if people vote for Yoder, it's because of, his whole campaign up until maybe a couple of weeks ago was immigration, ICE.
Sure.
If people are concerned about our border, our southern border, he's a Homeland Security chair. We have people, the caravan coming this way, and Kansas and other states are sending troops down there. So if that's what people really care about, that's going to be the key reason why Yoder wins.
We're in one part of the country that is maybe the toughest for Republicans right now because of the Trump effect, because wanting to be able, at the same night that the debate's happening, the president is tweeting his endorsement of Kevin Yoder. Obviously, there's a portion of the voting public that he absolutely wants that to get. There are big Trump supporters in this part of the country, but as you mentioned, in the last presidential election, a big part of this district did not vote for President Trump in that election. Sam, did you have something you wanted to ask?
No, just Trump is the five-letter elephant in the room, I counted before saying that to make sure I was accurate. And I think the blue wave is a part of that. The district fundamentals, I think, probably would have given any Democrat a shot, regardless. But I think if you combine those other couple of variables,
right.
I think that's what makes Yoder's campaign nervous, as you said. And it'd be interesting to see what their reaction was when President Trump tweeted that last night.
Yeah. So I'll put the both of you on the spot here with a week to go. Any chance you want to venture a prediction for next week?
I'll let Sarah go first.
You don't have to if you don't want to.
No,
but
you're
you have
fine.
a prediction for next week?
A prediction on who's going to win
on the race,
Yoder.
yeah.
I think Sharice Davis is going to win. I think that Yoder came out the gate, attack. And I think seeing that shows the nervousness that we mentioned. And I think I will add that I think this whole time we've been seeing these smear campaigns, these smear ads on both candidates. The big sticking point for Yoder against Sharice Davids was she supports abolishing ICE. She wants open borders. And this whole time, it's no secret that Sharice Davids was not, the most available person to be interviewed, right? But then I think finally she said, okay, once and for all, I've said this multiple times, I'm not for abolishing ICE. I think she should have said that earlier, because that's one of those issues where people might maybe vote for Yoder because of that rhetoric.
Do you think if she'd said that earlier, maybe it's not so close to race, possibly?
I think that because she wasn't so available, and
noticeably absent, I think is
right,
a good
exactly.
way to say it. She you could ask, when is she going to talk? That asks a lot.
Right, and I think that by her sitting down at this debate and saying that, it hopefully maybe for some people who maybe don't know either way, maybe that cleared it up. Yeah. I don't know.
Stephen?
So the newsroom politician is about to give a political answer.
Here we go.
I don't have a winner just yet, but I will say this. I think it's going to be very close. I think it will come down to if older voters vote early in big numbers, that will benefit Kevin Yoder, in my opinion. I think younger and more energized voters that will show up on election day will be those voters for Sharice Davis. All of that said, I'm not saying, I honestly don't know who's going to win, but I think, based on experience, if Sharice wins, I think possibly some people who elected her, just kind of like after the Trump thing, like you elected Trump and then you're kind of like, oh, who did we send? Based on experience, I think you may have some people, if she wins, kind of possibly second guessing it months later, just from a leadership standpoint, or not just towing the party line. When you're new in Congress, you kind of take a back seat because you're a freshman and people tell you what to do and all that stuff. And so it's just a matter of if she's going to be an independent voice for Kansas. So I know I gave a very political answer and I did not answer.
That's all right.
But I think it's going to be close.
If Laura Kelly wins, then Sharice Davids wins.
Yes, that is accurate.
Okay.
That is accurate.
To your point about early voting and your thought on that, I voted yesterday early in Johnson County, and I was the youngest person in the room.
And that was the discussion we had in the morning meeting.
Right.
Did you wear your Halloween jacket?
I should have. I was not there. I was there in the office to do vehicle registration stuff.
Oh.
I wasn't even planning to vote, and I saw.
Oh, so this is on your driver's license, the photo then, too.
Oh.
No. Thankfully, that was a reuse driver's license photo.
Okay.
But now I wish it was on my driver's license photo.
It's going to be a close one.
But there was a line out the door of people to vote while I was there, which, Tuesday afternoon, a week before the election, early voting. And as best I could tell, I was the youngest person in the room. So it's interesting to see what's going to happen with that. So obviously we've got less than a week to find out what's going to happen. Steve and Sarah, thank you both for your insight into this and for your thoughts on last night's debate and on the election altogether. Sam, good time to remind people about what's available as far as podcast options from 41 Action News.
Yeah, a new chew coming out tomorrow. The 4th and 1 Chiefs. It helps that we have an all-star quarterback, Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, he's good.
He's good. Maybe the best there's ever been in Kansas City.
Oh, I was like, okay.
Do you
I was
think
like,
they're going
whoa.
to rename the McRib the McHolmes?
Ooh, that would be a good question.
The McHolmes.
Yeah.
Well, ESPN SportsCenter tweeted out this morning, we're halfway through the season, who's your MVP? And the only two pictures they had on there were Patrick Mahomes and Todd Gurley from the Rams. Those are the only
Hey, Todd
two pictures.
Gurley, I'm biased as
Todd
Georgia,
Gurley.
but
Yeah, he's good too.
those are my top two.
And then the folks at Screen the Spot, they're coming up on their 1-year anniversary,
Excellent.
which is really kind of a cool deal. And so they continue to blog along. So give any of them a listen. What's really cool is we broadened out our reach last week. So now you can listen to us on Spotify, which is really kind of a cool thing. I was in my kitchen doing some kitchen work, and
As one does.
as one does. And I asked my Alexa smart speaker to play the Due Diligence podcast from Spotify, and all of a sudden I
And
heard
away we go.
and Lindsay's voice, and they had a
Wow.
great episode talking about women in the restaurant industry. So many great points. I thought one of the ones that they talked about that was fascinating. We think about the access to childcare during 9 to 5. It's expensive, right? But at least
Sure.
there's an availability for it. If you're a woman chef, that typically means you might be working until 10, 11, midnight, 1
Absolutely.
a.m. Childcare isn't quite as available at that point.
And if it is, it's much more expensive.
Right, or maybe the quality isn't quite what you want it
Yeah.
to be either. And so they talked about that and several other issues. There are lots of women chefs in Kansas City that are leading the way in talking about those issues. So it's kind of a really fascinating podcast. Really proud of the work that they're doing over there.
Excellent. So if you're a podcast fan, we have 4 very good, very different ones you can be listening to on all your different platforms. So be sure and subscribe to those. Give those a listen. For 41 Files, thanks so much for joining us, and have a happy Halloween.
See you next week.